Mrs. Hudson ushers our group of investigators, led by Wiggins, into 221B Baker Street. The warm morning air tells us that the rest of the day will be long and hot. "I assume you're here to see his lordship," Hudson says. She leads us to the top of the well-worn stairs, knocks twice at a door, and shows us in. The windows are thrown open, and Holmes's room is flooded with light. Dr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes are seated by the window, and their conversation stops as we approach. "Morning, gentlemen. How are we today? Ready for a hard day's work?" Holmes says with a grin. We all murmur our acceptance and begin to settle into the vacant seats around the room, but Holmes stops us immediately. "Don't sit down, gentlemen. A few things have caught my eye in the paper today, and I have a feeling you'll need to get to our learned friend Jasper Meeks right now." "That's a shame, Holmes. I've just made some tea. Oh well, all the more for me," chuckles Watson. We meet Sir Jasper Meeks at the hospital morgue. "Well, gentlemen, looks like you've caught me at a busy time. Holmes telegraphed me this morning and said he was sending you over to take a look at one of the bodies." He pulls back a white sheet to reveal a fat man of mid-30s with a short-cropped beard. Spread eagle on the slab, his mass is indeed apparent. "No idea who he is or where he's from, apart from the fact that he came in yesterday. However, I can make a few assumptions from the body. Want to hear them?" We nod. "The deceased was garroted to death using a heavy-gauge rope. You can still see the bite marks of the rope around the neck if you look carefully. Time of death is always hard with strangulation, but I would say around 9 p.m. on the night of the 3rd. I believe he was found down by the London Bridge on the south side. This is consistent with my observations, as this guy is obviously a docker or a seaman. The tattoos on his body and his brawny forearm suggest someone who is used to manual labour. A few scars on his body also suggest his docker spike must have slipped a few times. The only other thing worth telling you was that he had a note on him." Meeks passes it around. The note says, "Rosie, 11 p.m. I would say that the lucky lady was stood up that night, since he died before this time. That's about it from me. If you'll excuse me, I have to open someone who fell off a roof yesterday." Mrs. Hudson tells us that Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson have both left the house, so it seems that we are getting back to our case.
"Morning, gentlemen. Just a couple of things for you. We had a report of some cargo going missing down at the docks, if you want to check that out for us. A body was brought in yesterday, but we sent it to Sir Jasper Meeks. Obvious strangulation. Also, we didn't find anything at the crime scene down at the London Bridge, but you're more than welcome to go and check it out for yourself. Finally, this has just come in. Some guy just got pushed under a train at Waterloo Station. Well, they reckon he was pushed. Name of Jim Walker, if that's any help. That's it. Have a good day."
At London Bridge, we find very little at first glance. The police have either taken evidence or missed the obvious, and now is our chance to find the latter. After 5 minutes of searching the immediate vicinity, we conclude that Scotland Yard has done a thorough job, and nothing more can be gleaned. However, before turning away, Wiggins spots 2 patches of what appear to be dog droppings. Upon closer inspection, it turns out to be chewing tobacco that's maybe a few days old. Its matted fibres are starting to peel in the hot June sun. "What you reckon, lads? Tobacco from the victim or the murderer?" Wiggins says. "Or dog droppings," one of us replies. Wiggins sniffs the putrid mass. "Nah, it's got a spicy smell to it. No dog droppings smell like that, at least not in London anyway. I can't believe that these gents would travel too far to get their baccy. Maybe the nearest tobacconist might be able to help." He shrugs and wraps the mess in an old hanky from his top pocket. After doing some research, we find that the nearest tobacco seller is Allen's tobacconist shop. "Okay, let them through," yells the police officer as Wiggins pushes through the crowd gathered around the morbid scene. "Nasty one, this, not for the squeamish. Head and legs crushed, blood spattered all over the street. He's over there if you want to have a chat. Take a tissue. It doesn't look too good." We find the man to be in a sorry state and, before being carted off to Scotland Yard, ask the police officer a few questions. "Well, I was minding my own business when I sees these two gentlemen over the other side of the platform having a bit of an argument. We were at one of the quiet platforms on the northwest corner. There were other trains passing, and I didn't get a real good look. Next thing I know, one's under a passing train and the other's running off. Well, trying. He was a bit fat and had his fancy suit on. I could tell you he wasn't a runner. Anyway, I followed him as far as he could until he disappeared, which was somewhere across the road. That's all I can say, gentlemen. I need to go clean up this mess." Jim Walker's house is small and on Old Street. We knocked on the door, but there was no reply, and we were about to leave when the landlady emerged from the ground-floor flat. We told her our business, and she let us in using her master key. The flat was untidy and contained only the things that a docker would have in his possession: a few coils of rope, a docker's spike, a splicing knife, and a few bottles of firewater in a bedside cabinet. Behind the door was a pair of shoes with what appeared to be dried horse dung on them. As for paperwork or clues to Mr. Walker's whereabouts, none were to be found. The nearest tobacconist to the murder scene is a small shop found on Queen Victoria Street. A small bell chimes as we enter. A balding man of 50 with a waxed moustache looks up from his work.
"Gentlemen, how can I be of service?"
Wiggins flashes his ID and hands over the hanky containing the day's find.
"That stinks! Is it dog droppings?"
says the man in disgust. "We think it's tobacco, but it's got quite an odour to it, and I want to find out who buys the filthy stuff," Wiggins replies. Reluctantly, the man sniffs it more deeply. He suddenly states,
"Texas root. Yes, it's an acquired taste. Hold on, let me get the ledger."
5 minutes later, we walk out of the shop with two names, Cornelius Wood and Jim Walker. We knock on Cornelius Woods's door, and his wife opens it. She leads us to the kitchen where Cornelius is tucking into a meal of bread and cheese. Wiggins explains who we are and asks Cornelius if he chews Texas root. At this, his wife scoffs and said, I've been telling him for years to quit that stuff. Smells like dog droppings, doesn't it? Only if it's been out in the sun for a few days, laughs Wiggins. Everyone else looks at him in a confused manner. Quickly moving on, Wiggins asks, Where were you on the night of the 3rd? Cornelius thinks for a moment. Carlton Card Club. I had a nice wind that night and treated the wife to a hat the next day. His wife smiles, walks to the hall and fetches the newly acquired hat. Do you work as a docker, Mr. Wood? Wiggins continues. Who, me? No, I keep to the clean stuff. I do the accounts and handle the money at the Liverpool station. For the next few minutes we chat about the state of the rail system, and then leave. What do you lot want? You were only in here last week, says the bouncer at the door of the Carlton Card Club. Thanks for the warm welcome. Now piss off and get me the manager, Wiggins says impatiently. What is it this time, gentlemen? The manager asks with a sigh as he enters the reception area. We inquire about Mr. Wood and learns that he frequents the place about twice a month. He was there on the 3rd. According to the ledger, he left around 11 p.m. By all accounts, I think he was having a good night, but the expense of ours, the manager says as he ushers us to the door. You meet the manager, and he confirms that Mr. Wood works as an accountant. A reliable fellow, but he does like the cards, he says with an air of disapproval. The smell of salty air and fish hits us as we exit the carriage and make our way to the dock's entrance. The foreman, Abel Green, is a big, burly man of 6 feet with arms like tree trunks. He greets us as we enter. Gents, I can see you are men of the law. What's the trouble? I've paid all my taxes, he says with a wink. Is it about the crate that went missing? The crate? Wiggins asks. Yeah, the one I reported yesterday morning. If it is, I'm impressed with the speed at which Scotland Yard works. I'm usually slagging them off, but obviously I was wrong. Well, yes, the crate. What of it? Wiggins replies, not wanting to sound as though Scotland Yard were a bunch of mindless buffoons. Well, the Mary Rose comes in on June the 3rd from the West Indies, shipping company at 11 p.m. She was a little late, but as ships go, she made good passage. We unloaded her and placed the cargo in the warehouse, all locked up. We work a 3-man shift on Pier 16, but it was extra work for the lads last night because one never showed up. Wait till I get him over the barrel. Wiggins's eyes start to widen. Yeah, it was only Alan Johnson and his mate, Jim Walker. Morris Brown didn't show up, the twat. As a result, they were about a half-hour late leaving. I have to admit I was a little tired. Maybe shut my eyes for a quick snooze before the next shift came in at 2 a.m., but who wouldn't? Kids kept me up the previous night, he said sheepishly. Well, right, Scotland Yard's finest are on the case, sir, Wiggins says. What about signs of entry? None that we can find. The only thing missing was the crate and the manifest. I think the blighters on the next watch might have nicked it, he says with a chortle. Mind you, those crates are pretty heavy. It would take a few of them, or a horse and cart to lift it, he adds with a laugh. Who is the foreman after you? Wiggins asks. Gilbert Morgan from the north side. We say things a little differently. Let's just leave it at that. Just as we walk out the door, the foreman turns and says, Glad you didn't mention my tax payments, boys. Morris Brown's apartment is locked. I think this requires an element of breaking and entering, my dear fellows, Wiggins says with a grin as he digs a small jemmy from his pocket. He carefully picks the lock, and the door opens to the apartment. We enter stealthily, just in case Morris is in slumber. The flat is empty, besides an assortment of household items, mainly work clothes and the usual docker's equipment. We agree not to disturb too much, but upon reaching the first desk we realize that it won't matter. On the desk is a photo of a fat man standing next to a Billingsgate Dock Pier 2 sign. His close-cropped beard gives his identity away. Alan was a family man. His son and daughter opened the door for us. The children took us into the parlour to meet with him and his wife Joan. Apart from the usual docker's equipment, rope, a marlin spike, and some heavy work clothes, the house was neat and tidy and would not have seemed a working man's abode. Mr. Johnson looks worried after seeing Wiggins' ID.
"Gentlemen, what brings you here?"
Wiggins begins his questioning. "Do you know Jim Walker and Morris Brown?"
"Yes, we're mates down at Billingsdale Docks. We've done 5 years together. Is everything okay?"
"When was the last time you saw them?"
"Well, that would be the night of the 3rd. We finished our shift late because Morris didn't show up. First time in 5 years. I mean, he's been late, from too much piss the night before, but he's always at work. We finished around 12 a.m. We started to walk home together that night, but about 15 minutes after he left, Jim realised he had one of the yard keys in his pocket and went back to hand it in. I couldn't hang around because I had to pick up my wife from a ladies' evening. That was the last I saw of him. Not been to work since because I've got a couple of days off. We're taking the kids down to the coast. My wife's mum has a farm down there, and we always take the family holiday during the first week of June. It's tradition."
"Did you notice anything funny on the day of the 3rd or the days leading up to it?"
"What do you mean?"
"Things out of the ordinary."
"Well, I found a manifest from the Mary Rose. It's a ship that's docked recently. It was in my pocket. I'd not noticed it till today because I'm going on holiday and I don't wear my work clothes. I've no idea how it got there. The manifest never leaves the yard. It's important, so they must be going crazy down there. Nothing can move out of the yard till that manifest is signed by customs."
At this he shows us the manifest. There is a list of 50 crates with numbers on them. Each has the contents of the crate and the address of where the goods will be going to, and all but one of them is ticked. The odd one out has a circle round it. Crate 92, Windies to London, Pier 16. Cargo, clay pots. Destination, Goldsmith Jewellers. "Clay pots?" Wiggins inquires.
"Yeah, it's code for pearls. You never write on the manifest what's in the crate. Too many things can go walking if you write gold or pearls on the manifest. Custom knows the score and has a list of the codes. We usually get the manifest a few days before the ship comes in."
"Anything else out of the ordinary?"
"Well, I'll have to say that things have been a bit tense at the yard recently. We're all mates and we all work as a team, but one day I heard Jim and Morris having a real row. They were at the far end of the pier, so I couldn't hear what was being said, but there was lots of finger-pointing. I tried to talk to Jim about it on the way home, but he was tight-lipped."
"We tend not to divulge our suppliers of jewels for the fear of the competition, but as this is a police matter, all I can say is that we get most of our pearls from the Middle East," says the manager of Goldsmith. "You could talk to St. James Arnold about it. I don't like the man myself, but I have to admit he's an avid collector and an expert in the field of pearls. He's in here every so often sniffing around for deals or trying to find information on our suppliers. The only other person we see on a semi-regular basis is Jane Rose, and I think you can catch her at the Standard Theatre. Good day to you." We are met at Sir James Arnold's house by the butler, who informs us that Mr. Arnold is out back admiring a new carriage he's recently purchased. We are led through a lavish hall to a huge courtyard behind the house. Sir James Arnold emerges from the stables, locks the door, and strides over to us. He is a portly gentleman and looks a little flustered upon seeing us.
"These young fillies are a bit pricey. Must keep them locked up, and I don't mean the horses,"
he snorts as he strides over. Wiggins explains who we are and that we'd been informed that he was London's leading expert on pearls. At this, Sir James Arnold puffs his chest out and says,
"Yes, my dear fellow, I am. Do you want me to look at some of the beauties?"
"We were wondering more about who on the pearl circuit had been asking or inquiring about pearls, or if you've heard of any shady dealings." Sir James Arnold's face visibly drops.
"Well, pearls are a girl's best friend, don't they say? What?"
"No, I think it's diamonds, actually," says Wiggins. Sir Arnold seems unperturbed by Wiggins' rudeness.
"I've not heard of anything recently," he says, and pauses for a moment. "Although I seem to recall a friend of mine mentioning a shipment due in sometime this week. As to who's interested, well, I suggest you ask Goldsmith Jewellers, the 15 Jewellers. I tend to deal directly with the supplier. Better quality, you know. Now, gentlemen, I have work to attend to. My butler will see you out."
As we are ushered from the house, Wiggins digs for more information from the butler. "Where was, say, Sir James on the evening of the 3rd?
"Sir James was entertaining here. There was a massive dinner party here from 7 p.m. till, well, about 2 a.m. Sir James is a popular fellow. The place was very busy. Carriages coming and going all night. The courtyard was a complete mess. I've only just cleaned the place up."
Satisfied of Arnold's whereabouts on the night in question, we leave the butler to finish his cleaning. Arriving at Jane Rose's house, we learned that she can be found performing at the Standard Theatre. We catch Jane Rose in her room before rehearsals. We are led to the backstage area and ushered into a small room.
"Are you staring at my chest, you filthy pervert?"
demands Jane Rose. No, it's what's hanging on it," Wiggins mumbles, looking at the jewelled necklace hanging from Jane Rose's neck.
"Well, you can't have it. Now what do you want?"
Wiggins starts his questioning. "Where were you on June 3rd at 9 p.m?
"Well, if you read the bloody sign outside, it says I was singing here. Christ, you're obviously not the sharpest tool in the shed, are you, love? Call yourself a detective?"
Blushing, Wiggins says, "And you finished at 11 p.m?
"Well done," she says sarcastically.
"Who are you going to meet after the show?"
"Meet? Listen to me, sunshine. After a 4-hour show, the last thing I want to do is go out on a date."
"Do you know any sailors?"
"Oh, I've known quite a few sailors in my time, honey," she says with a wink.
Okay, we get the picture," says Wiggins. We make our way to the exit before Mrs. Rose embellishes the story any further.
Hello. How can I do for you, gentlemen?
asks the clerk when we arrive at the small West Indies Shipping Company office in Leadenhall Street.
Sorry, but I won't be much help to you,
he continues after we state our business.
We do not deal with sailors directly here. You should go down to Billingsgate Docks. Maybe they know something.
Gilbert Morgan is wiry and well-groomed, the complete opposite of Abel Green. He lets us into his top-floor apartment overlooking London. From the window we can see the River Thames and Charing Cross Bridge. "I've had salt water in me blood since me father went to sea," Gilbert says. "Can't stand being away from it." Wiggins asks about the shift on June 4th. "Yeah, it was a late one. 2 a.m. No ships were coming in. The last one was the Mary Rose. All we did was take the watch. All quiet, and nothing happened." We ask about Abel Green and his crew. "We don't speak much, and we don't get on. I run a tight ship, and he's slack. The number of times I've caught him asleep on watch is not funny. It's unprofessional. I don't make waves, though. I do my job, and I do it well. Nothing went missing when we were on duty." We thank him for his time, and he goes back to the bed from which we woke him. We arrive at Abel Green's house, only to be told he is on duty at the Billingsgate dock. We thank the landlady and leave. Although we were almost run over at the gates, the owner of London Improved Cab Company is welcoming. The place is a hive of activity, and we can tell the owner is short on time.
"Gentlemen, do you want to know about the missing carriage, or do you want to know its whereabouts?"
"The former," we reply.
"Well, Governor, not much to say, really. The driver was threatened with a long, spiky thing early on June 4th. He reckons it was around 12:30 a.m., over by the Tower of London. The thief was wearing heavy clothing and a cloth mask over his face, maybe a worker's hat. He was unsure, as it was pretty dark that night. I tell my men, when you get a man like that, then just get off quick, save yourself. The carriage will always be found at a later date. Don't be a hero, I say. Most of these men have a family to support. Why risk it?"
We nod in agreement. We've finally found someone in London who cares more about his employees than money. We tell him that if we find the carriage, we won't accept the reward. He waves his thanks and disappears into the mass of people in his office.
Arriving at Tony Scott's house, we find no one to be at home at the moment, but a slightly annoyed constable patrolling nearby tells us, "Scotland Yard already looked into this. He got drunk, fell off the roof. Multiple witnesses can confirm that. End of story, gentlemen." Joan Bellinger opens a door for us. "I'm sorry, but we do not know anything about strangled people or sailors," she tells us after we explain her the details of our case. We wish the happy couple our best wishes and swiftly retreat from the residence. Rosalind Mayflower is a pale-looking young lady who lives with her mother in a small apartment on Seymour Street.
"Oh, you came because of this note in the newspaper," she tells us, blushing. "This is quite embarrassing, really. You see, I do not know who wrote it, or if it is even addressed to me or not, but everyone keeps asking me about it. Whoever did it, he should be more responsible. It is simply rude to put every Rosalind in London in such a confusing position."
"Do you know any other sailors? Or maybe you happen to know anyone with J.R. initials?" asks Wiggins, not losing hope.
"No, of course not,"
answers Rosalind, blushing even more. Confused and a little bit ashamed of our intrusion, we leave the residence. After a long day of running around London, we gather again at 221B Baker Street to share our findings on the case. "This case was quite an interesting one," said Holmes after sitting down by the fire. "Greed, deception and murder go hand in hand in this city.
I suspected a connection after learning about a note on the body and reading the article in the Times about Mary Rose porting at Billingsgate Docks. So, not long after investigating the murder scene, I went directly to Billingsgate Docks and was able to establish the likely name of the body and possible suspects. Morris Brown was supposed to unload the ship that night, but never showed up. The missing crate was likely a motive, and Jim Walker and Ellen Johnson are probably thieves. From our friends at Scotland Yard, I learned about Jim Walker's death at Waterloo Station. Poor fellow was pushed under the train by another accomplice. The visit to Mr. Allen cleared up a few things. First, Mr. Allen had a solid alibi, and secondly, the contents of the stolen crate were pearls. So, Jim Walker became a prime suspect. We immediately went to the destination of the crate listed on the manifest, Goldsmith Jewellers, which led us to London's renowned pearl expert, Sir James Arnold. As we now know, Morris Brown and Jim Walker had an agreement with Sir James Arnold to sell him the stolen crate. At the last moment, Morris Brown got cold feet about committing the crime, and the poor lad was strangled by Jim Walker. Jim Walker robbed a horse and carriage from a local cab company to move the heavy crate and transported it directly to Sir James Arnold. Sir James hid the crate in his stables with his prized horses. The next day, Sir James met the aggrieved Jim Walker at Waterloo Station. Jim Walker resented having to murder his friend and demanded extra payment for carrying out the dirty work. This led to Sir James Arnold, greedy as ever, pushing Jim Walker to his death under a speeding train.